today we are going to sit down and talk about the best clans at the moment and the clans that kind of need some help. We're doing an end of year tier list. We are doing a end of year tier list for premium. I'm going to go over what decks I think are currently really good right now and which ones that kind of just need some help. 100% my take. This is just based off results as well as my own personal experience with BCS Philadelphia, which I didn't do as hot as I thought I was going to, so that was kind of unfortunate, but you know what, we learn and we move past it. So without further ado, let's get started. And this is going to be kind of in an order where it's like which nation has the least amount of clans versus the most, which I'll save for the very end. So also, if you hear Doggo in background, he is kind of annoying. So let's start with Dimension Police. I think Dimension Police, as it is right now, has a lot of potential, but it has a few major glaring issues. The first one, and probably the most obvious one, is that outside of, what is it, Excalibur, you don't have, and possible stand triggers you may hit, it's a 3-attack deck in a multi-attack format, and that's really the big problem, right? Like, you can have as much defensive value off Highlander and Geomaglass as you want. There are some decks that can easily break through that. And so, even with something like Linka, where you can just, shield break, Daikaiser style, like, there's only so much you can realistically do with Dimension Police until you hit a ceiling. And I think, while it has been topping and while it has been doing well, I think going into next year, I think it's going to hit a brick wall. And that is simply because, as good as Highlander is, there has to be a little bit of deviation of it, right? I've seen some lists where they run the History Stride and the Grand Gallop or whatever it is, but those are a bit finicky, and really your main line is ride Highlander, build up defensive, and your biggest other major problem is that until you hit Highlander, until you hit grade 3 in general, and you're able to stride into Geomaglass or just flip up a Geomaglass, you have a lot of dead weight in terms of your grade 3. So that's another massive problem with the deck. And so if next year it's able to do even just as consistently or a bit more and still get around those problems, then maybe. But as it stands now, I can't in good faith put it in this solid pick tier. Just simply because there's a lot of decks right now that kind of do what it wants to do, but better. Speaking of decks that kind of struggle a bit, I'm going to put Nova's also in the same tier. And the reason for this is Nova's, it has solid early to mid game, and its late game is not bad. But when you compare Nova Grappler to every other Excel deck in the format, even Aqua Force to a lesser extent, it's kind of just sitting there, right? Like, yes, you have your Bustard turn. Yes, you have, Vic 10, which costs basically nothing to actually get off. The main issue that kind of comes up is it's just a mess. Like, they're like, you have to see a lot of pieces in the early game. You have to see pieces in general all throughout the game. And when other clans could do your job but better, that's where we have problems. Like, sure, you could go 6 drive checks plus, Brent Gate OT, but when does that situation really come up at the end of the day? Like, a lot of the times you're checking blanks, and then when you check blanks, you don't have defensive value, and then your deck falls apart, So, especially with the direction that it's currently is, where you go Victor, create the double XLs, and just try to survive from there. Trying to survive in this format is just not ideal. So, I think the deck has potential, especially going into next year, but we're going to need to see more results for it, like, honestly, at this point. And then Link Joker, I think that it is a solid pick, regardless of which route you go through, right? Because we saw Messiah do well, we saw Chaos do well, and we started to see this Freeze Ray Deleter build, this Freeze Ray Control build kind of come up lately. And I think that's going to be a build that people are going to have to study, myself included, because the idea that Link Joker suddenly has a way to get around some of the best decks of the format while still being a rogue pick is actually kind of crazy. Like, I think it's really good. Being able to also set up, in a way, an alternate win condition in conjunction to that is also valuable in this format. So, like, that is the one thing that I think gives Link Joker bit of an edge in comparison to a lot of other control decks. I think it's probably, like, just... It has the potential to become one of the best decks in the format. Especially the freeze rate control build. Like, once people start fine-tuning it, I think it could actually really do well. Especially into stuff like Grand Blue, it's just stuff like Katrina. Multi-attack decks that actively rely on the rear guard suddenly have to sit there and think, damn, how do I play around this? Because the other massive thing, too, is they could set up an alternate win condition with the Deleter Grade 4 that has that alternate win con. And that's simply because of Elro, which... I think that's its name, where it can countercharge and, you know, Vanish Delete, which is bind face down, a card in their drop zone. So, like, if they're able to set that up, if the game goes on long enough, it has potential to do that. And so, when you take that into consideration on top of the pre-existing variants of, like, Joker, like Messiah, and Chaos, there's a lot of potential for this clan. And I think, going forward, I'm kind of curious to see where people will take it for the rest of the season and kind of go from there, you know? So, yeah. Link Joker, good. Alright, up next. What is this? This is Great Nature. Build a time machine, big dog. Like, the biggest problem with Great Nature right now is that every other Excel clan can do its job better, right? Even if you got Spangled back, it really wouldn't change much. Like, you would have a funny cheese win con. Kinda, not really. It's kind of just sitting there. You could just... I mean, yes, you have, like, Megaloma to deck out, and then just put yourself in a position where you could possibly win. But, I don't know. I just feel like it's a bit clunky. Especially when you're still actively relying on certain cards like Crayon Tiger and Rhino to do even half of your effects. At that point, it's kind of just a little awkward, you know? So, I think as it stands now, I think there's a lot that needs to be done to make it viable. Whether or not standard support comes out next year for it to make it actually somewhat playable, that's up for debate, because as far as we know, we're not getting any premium support anytime soon, so yikes. Up next, Mega Colony, one of the best decks in the format. I'm not sorry. Alright, look. Mega Colony, you know what, I might as well just put Neonectar up there too, just slightly above Mega Colony. I think ever since the season first started, Mega Colony has been proving to be one of the best decks of the format and probably one of the best anti-meta picks, period. I think the idea that you have such a controlling playstyle in the form of Greydora is downright stupid. Like, let's be honest, we're a hot minute. No one really likes Greydora, but yet it's still, like, kind of a necessary evil, as I was pointed out to by Devin Cassidy when I talked to him at BCS Philly. While initially I kind of was just like, maybe they should hit Greydora to an extent, I kind of do agree with him now where it's kind of a necessary evil, especially in comparison to Katrina, right? Because Katrina is easily one of because Katrina is one of the best decks of the format, right? It has multi-attacking out the wazoo. You've got Planetary Generation, that means that you're not wasting cards from hand. You've got really good defensive value off, you know, Katrina plus Liliga. So, like, you have a lot of tools. It's such a small package. Because of decks like that and other decks like Rambloo that kind of just sit there and go, oh, I could do like a bajillion attacks because of my drop zone. Greydora kind of has to exist, right? And so, I think the big takeaway from all this is that Neonectar and Greydora are going to be around until they inevitably get hit again. And Greydora, I think because of how much public outcry there is, I think people will kind of bully Bushiroad into possibly doing something about it. I doubt it. But if it does happen, then Greydora is probably obviously on the chopping block. But I think at this point it's kind of necessary. It is also kind of the best skill check deck you could possibly have in Vanguard, because if you can't beat Greydora, then there's something wrong. So I personally think that it's fine to stay in the format. I think that it's going to continuously be one of the best decks in the format. Although I'm not gonna lie, if it wins Worlds, it's probably getting hit. Like, let's be honest for a minute, right? Because having such a strong stride, I think it's actually probably one of the best strides in the history of the game. I think it's one of the most poorly designed cards, I'm gonna be honest. But I also admit, without Greydora, a lot of these other picks, like later that I'll be talking about, probably would be just running rampant. And it's weird to say, but I actually kind of don't mind Greydora being in the format. So yeah, Greydora and Neonectar peak. All right. So up next, let's talk about decks that up till recently I probably would have said, you know, they're pretty terrible, but I'm actually gonna put Aqua Force above Nova Grappler here. I think the deck, especially after Philly and other events that we've been seeing Aqua Force here and there sparsely come up, I think the deck has potential. I think the biggest issue, though, I don't know, like, I think Aqua Force has potential. I think the really big question is will any of the support that comes out next year help Aqua Force in the long term? If Aqua Force for some odd reason gets a Stride deck set, this easily shoots up a tier, because Aqua Force with Draw Engine and just being able to sit there and say fuck you, like, with like really wonky like multi-attack patterns, I think it has potential, but it's still gonna need a lot of work. But I do think it's at least better than Nova Grappler, because it recently did get a top, so like you gotta take it as it is, you know. So Aqua Force, solid pick. And then I'm gonna say, I mean, maybe not solid pick, but it still needs a little bit of work. I think Bermuda goes around here. No, goes like, I think it's slightly above Link Joker, but I think it's a solid pick. I think the idea that Highlander has still been one of the best decks of the format, I think is really telling. I think the idea that you also now suddenly have a Denial Griffin-esque play might shoot it up a tier in later tier list videos, depending if they inevitably hit that with like Citron. Because the idea that you have like the Trick or Treat grade 1 that can just bounce a card back to hand is a bit obnoxious, especially for decks that have a very like streamlined line of play. And then suddenly they get disrupted like that. It's kind of really annoying, especially when they're able to generate that many markers and have that many attacks, and then the deck enough to a point where they're going to see Red OT inevitably. Like, so it's one of those decks that you kind of have to take into consideration into every single like major event you go into. And I think that we're starting to hit a ceiling with this deck. I think it's definitely really good. I think it has the potential to become one of the best decks in the format, although only time will tell whether or not it will stay that way. And I could probably say the same thing for Grablo. I'm gonna actually put Grablo like right around here. I think it's really strong. I think it's still good, but the major issue right now is Greydora, right? You have literally everything coming to you, and you're getting even more support going forward with the Night Rose Stride deck set, which I do see potential with. I do see a world where Grand Blue decks kind of lead towards into the Crest variant a bit, just to make up a little bit extra power to give them something, especially on the Bandit Rum term too, like, so that way they're not just doing Ghost Ship, a bajillion draws pass, you know. So like, I think there's a lot of potential for the deck, and I think it's still one of the best decks of the format. I just don't think it's one of the best decks right now. I think it's solid, you know, but whether or not the Stride deck set helps it, that remains to be seen, right? So I'm just going to keep it there. I know that's a hot take, but that's honestly how I personally feel. Go ahead and fight me in the comments section. Alright, up next. Pale Moon. You're like, not even on my radar. I'm going to be truthful. Like, I don't think I remember the last time I've seen Pale Moon on stream, or just in tops in general. I think like I said with Night Rose, I think Harry getting its support next year is going to bump it up a few tiers, just simply because at that point you're generating power, you're generating draw, and you have retire potential as well mid-battle, so that actually matters a lot. So I think that, like, I you know what, I'm going to put this in potential for now, because I don't think I don't think it's coping. I think it's going to have a lot of potential going forward next year. And I definitely see a world where it becomes a solid pick. But it just needs time to cook. And speaking of that, spikes. I think you go right around here. And I think if I'm going to readjust this for a moment, I think this goes like this. Honestly, probably like this, if I'm being honest, right? Spikes is really solid. It has a solid package. You know, Galley Stride kind of go burr. But you only had like maybe one top, right? Which honestly, I think it puts it above Nova's, sadly. That's my final committal for the time being. I think the big thing is that Spikes have a very streamlined game plan. It is just, what it takes is a good pilot, right? And we see that before in some of the European BCSs. And I think that Spike Brothers, as it is right now, is not a bad pick if you know how to pilot it. Like, I think anything that has potential requires a good pilot, right? And so, you know what? What other minor adjustment? Because I'm realizing that, like, people are going to flame me in the comment section if I don't put DP in solid pick choice, even if it gets my wishes. Like, you're happy now? Like, so, I think Spikes has a lot of potential. It just, I kind of curious to see if anyone else could pilot it well next year, you know, so, yeah, so Spikes goes there. Dark Irregulars. I hate this deck. I think a lot of people hate this deck. But I'm still going to say has potential, right? I think I'm still going to put it above these. Yeah, like right around here is good. And the main reason for it is, if you high roll off NOK, you're practically winning, right? There's like, especially if you get Hope on Damp in conjunction to it, like, it's been doing the same thing it's been doing since the very start of, like, the V-Series, right? Like, it does, like, it's NOK multi-attack shenanigans, and then you go into your other stride to kind of capitalize on it, and if somehow your opponent's still alive after that, then you're kind of just cooked. So, it's one of those really strong FTK decks that kind of just sits there and goes, okay, I'm here. I don't see my right target. Okay, GG. And then if you do see your right target, that is like, okay, would you like to concede? So it's one of those things, and I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. So that's why I think it has potential. I just want to see some results before I really sit there and say, okay, yeah, no, this deck is still good. Gears. I think this is like right alongside here. Gears is really annoying, right? Especially with the crest, especially with the fact that you have history build now, that people have been kind of leading towards now lately. Being able to sit there and go, if I go first, I pretty much auto-win in most scenarios. Like, it's kind of awkward. I feel like the entire format, for the most part, is just go first, do your big turn on grade 3, clean up on the follow-up, you know? So, Gear Chronicle is the perfect example for that, right? You ride basic gear, you get your crest, you go into Lost Age, I think it's called, right? Create the force, and then you do wonky shenanigans with time leaping, and then you still do the same play with Gear Groovy and the history build. And so, and then that's on top of still having access to next stage too, and also if you decide to run Ragnarok Dragon as well, like it's doable, right? And I definitely see a world where it continues to be viable. It's just, we're gonna have to wait and see like how much better it gets, I think, at this rate. Especially because I don't think the new Kronos command does anything for the deck. And I definitely think Glimmer Breath is kind of just whatever. So, I don't think any of the standard includes get thrown in here like last time. I think it's good as it is right now. I think it's still a solid choice. If you know how to pilot it, you're more, unless you somehow brick really hard, it's unlikely you're losing, right? So, that's where we're at. Oh, okay. Okay, so now I'm actually going to have to think for a moment. Kagero goes down here. You need a lot of work, buddy. That's all I'm going to say. Shoot. I think this is Tachi's, same thing. Like, you have an infinite loop, which is funny, but it's kind of whatever. Murakumo, kind of a similar vein, although I understand Murakumo why it does well. It's just, I hope I didn't fuck that up, honestly. I hope I didn't fuck that up. Okay, so yeah, I just double checked. I actually triple checked. It is the right one. So Murakumo, kind of a similar boat. I think Murakumo's biggest problem is that it just, you do funny shenanigans, but I think what it really takes is a good pilot. And I see a lot of potential, but I don't, not nearly as much as some of these other clans. So I don't even remember the last time I heard about Murakumo or Tachi's or even Kagero doing something really. So I'm just going to leave it there. and you guys could just tell me I'm wrong in the comment section. Narukami, I think it's still a solid pick. I think Narukami is nowhere near as broken as it was before, but I think it really is strong. The idea that you still, like, you go Vanquisher into Double XL, and then you have, like, an Eradicator follow-up is really good. And depending on the build, you either go Sweep Command, or you go Valak Saber Reverse. And the fact that you have that kind of versatility in the deck builds is actually really valuable. So I just don't see a world where Narukami drops down anytime soon, unless they somehow hit Impede, which is unlikely. So I think it's going to stay really good going forward. I think it's funny because there are a lot of really good decks in this format that I see that, like, I think that even some of the, like, the lower tier picks are actually viable to an extent too, right? Like, anything that has potential, you know, has a chance of beating the solid picks, you know, and then, you know, it's just, like, I think that Narukami is going to still do well, you know, even, like, going forward into the, like, the rest of the, like, the season. I don't know if it's going to be nearly as dominating as it was before in past years, but I definitely see a world where it still continues to do well in the format. Wow. I can't English today. Nubtama. Fuck Nubas. I think it's best deck in the format. Get mad at me all you want. I know that it's been kind of, like, decisive between Neonectar and Nubtama, but I'm going to say Nubtama's best deck. I think the idea that you have so many lines of play that just honestly bend your opponent over and screw them over is ridiculous, right? Because you either do, you know, once you're done with your, like, ride up turn and do the double protect, and then you do the stride scale and do the restanding and all that other crap, then you have your second stride turn. And then depending on what happens there, I talked about it in one of my past videos, you either go Rene with Mizukaze or you go Sukumura-kan with Mizukaze. And in either case, you're just dead, right? So, I think that Nubtama might need to be hit in the future. I don't know what exactly you would hit outside of Mizukaze, because I think that's really the big problem child. It's kind of like Hope on Damp in Dark Irregulars, except arguably worse. Because, just simply because, like, at least with Hope on Damp, you can at least guard at certain intervals. This straight up says no. So, I think Nubtama is easily one of the best decks. I think because also on top of that, you also have the crest that just scales over time. I think it's a bit ridiculous, but we're just going to have to wait and see what happens. Alright, up next. This one is OTT. Build a time machine, big dog. Like, you need a lot of help. Royal Paladin, I think, has potential. I'm going to put it, like, right around here, right? Actually move this over. I think it has potential. I think, you know, especially as of late, because there was also, like, an Alden that topped, you know, too, with, like, an Alden Jewel Knight, which I found pretty cool. But I kind of want to see more results before I say it's a solid pick. I'm kind of just speedrunning through this. Gold Paladin, similar boat, like, has potential, just needs the right pilot. Shadow Paladin, same thing. Just mostly because, like, I think Shadow Paladin actually is not, I think it's a bit above. Like, I think the Paladin clans are kind of equal right now. Simply because with, you know, golds you have, like, the Double XL plus Percival, and then you have a very solid follow-up, either with any, like, V-Gurgit, or you go Ultima. In either route, it's fine. Royal Paladins, you have Jewel Knights, and it's going to be continuously be really solid. Even if you deviate a bit and you go, like, Alt Mile plus whatever, like, good stuff package you want to throw in, you can. And then Shadow Paladin has Revengers, and Revengers are actually not bad. As someone who played it in Philly, like, I think there were a surprising amount of Revengers in Philly, funnily enough. And I think if you high roll enough, it has the potential. But even if you don't, as long as you play your cards right and you know exactly what kind of lines you want to take into each specific matchup, I think it has probably the most potential out of every single deck that is in, like, the has potential route, outside of maybe Harry. So I definitely see a world where Shadow Paladin continues to do well. It just, you need a solid pilot. Genesis. Ugh. Time issues aside, it's actually not bad. I think it has potential, just needs a really good pilot. And now we get to Angel Feather Giz. Oh, hot take. Hot take. This is in the top of solid pick. I don't think it's one of the best decks. I don't think so. And it's funny because when you look at the pie chart, a lot of these lower decks could have been its own tier, right? But I think as it stands now, Angel Feather Giz is a solid pick, and if you don't respect the matchup, you're going to get cooked, right? And I'm going to have a future video come out at the end of the year that covers Angel Feather Giz and why it's so good. But I think that as it stands now, like, Angel Feather Giz is, like, really solid. I think the idea that you could possibly kill your opponent while they're still on grade 2, if you're lucky enough, is actually kind of funny. In general, I think the deck has a lot of potential, but it really does just depend on how you build it, you know, so... Man, this deck is stupid. I've seen it in action, and, like, even when you, like, let's say, like, if you're playing something like Neonectar and you Mega Loma just to get around it, right? You don't have the best follow-up. And so, what ends up happening is, you sit there and you do, you know, Mega Loma, you go to Katrina, do a couple different plays, but then if your opponent has a hand, GG. Like, there are only a handful of decks or cards that can at least somewhat mitigate Giz's, you know, power potential, but if they have even something, like, even the slightest defensive value, right, still, even after everything, after losing their G-Zone and having all the Xerath Dragons on the board, it's kind of still like, damn, how do I beat over this 30k beat stick? You know, so it is one of those weird, awkward scenarios, but I think the deck has potential, so I think it's one of the best decks going into, like, the rest of the season, and it's one of the few decks where I think I could bump it up a tier if I see more results with it. So yeah, that's my tier list. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section. I think this is kind of just where I'm at in terms of the overall baseline right now. I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me on a lot of this, but honestly, I don't care. Let me know your takes in the comment section, especially if you got to multiple BCSs this year and you've kind of, like, seen the metagame develop so far. And if you're planning to go into more of them, because unfortunately I will not be. I've got a lot of stuff going on in my personal life, but I'm going to be keeping a close eye on the metagame and giving you guys my takes with it going forward into the next year, the rest of the BCS season. So until next time, this is Noah, and I'll catch you guys later. Bye, everyone.